Hey guys, welcome to that Bible Guide channel. What should be our most effective evangelism? So what should we share most of all about the gospel? Oftentimes we're in a situation where we feel like we should share, or we're about to share, or we don't share and we think, what should I have said there? What should be on the tip of my tongue regarding God and the gospel? And the other caveat to this little video is also, what are the roots of modern atheism? Because we're going to talk about that as a way to help us know what we should share. You'll see what the link is in a moment. But what should we share? I'm going to share today is that we should share about what God has done and what He's doing, past and present. We'll come to that in a second. But I think we've got to learn from past mistakes. This whole idea of the modern atheism, what am I talking about? Well, Descartes was one of the philosophers who created what's known as the God of the philosophers. They believed that philosophy could explain God and the evidences for God better than anything else. They explained God by referring to reason, logic, and nature instead of what had been used before. And this is all like in the 17th century. Problems ensued from this. Instead of an appeal to Jesus, they appealed to reason. Instead of an appeal to Christian experience, they appealed to nature. The God of the philosophers, to many then, became what was known as quite abstract and impersonal. So for instance, if I was to share about why someone should get married, I could share about the institution of marriage, God's plan for marriage, the alternative to marriage, the really successful things that can happen in someone's marriage. But wouldn't it be really strange if I didn't actually talk about my own wife, about my own experience of being married? And this is what the philosophers talked about, this God that may very well have good reasoning, and I like philosophy sometimes, but they appeal to God by not referring to Jesus or Christian experiences, and that God then seemed impersonal and abstract, a bit like that marriage analogy that I was sharing there now as well. Well, what happens in Scripture? How do they share evangelistically when they're trying to convert someone to the gospel? Well, Paul said in 1 Corinthians 2 verse 2, I'm going to share Christ and Him crucified. That's it. I want to talk about nothing else except Christ and Him crucified. If you read the book of Acts, chapter after chapter after chapter, you see Paul appeal to them. He reasons with them in the scriptures, explaining and proving that the Messiah had to suffer and rise from the dead. This is Acts 17, just before he's about to go into Athens, and this is Thessalonica. So he was saying, I shared about Christ had to suffer and rise from the dead. He kept referring to Jesus, His life and His death, but very specifically His resurrection. That was the ethos of what Paul was trying to share. So the point I want to make today is, what's our best evangelistic strategy? You know, we don't like the word strategy, but it just helps my mind. What should we aim to share? Well, let's not make the mistake that the God of the philosophers made in removing Christ and removing Christian experiences and how God is actually personally involved in the world, because that might create, people ended up with the problem of suffering came about through the writing of the philosophers. It was a modern problem, not an old problem. But what should we share? Well, here's a couple of questions that I'll have in reference to what we should share. Share about what God has done. Can we share about what God has done? The Bible is full of this. When God was like, when you meet someone opposed to you, share what I've done. Remind the people of what I've done. Led them through the wilderness. Led them through the Red Sea. Took them out of slavery. What has God done for you? What has He done for us that we can then share? There's probably many, many things that God has done in our life. For me personally, He took me from a place of lostness and no hope. I remember having no hope. I remember having that feeling of having no hope. I remember having gifts and talents that I felt I had, but I couldn't use them because I was too insecure in myself. My foundation was crumbling and weak. God gave me a strong foundation and helped me to use my gifts and talents. Second question, though, this might be a bit harder. So share what God has done. Share what God is doing, present. What's He doing right now? Now that might raise a question in us, which is, do I know what God's doing right now? Do I feel clear on what God is doing right now? I feel like God is helping me personally right now in ways when I study the scriptures. He's showing me my impatience and how that results in negative outcomes. So I love it when I feel God's hand in my life through the scriptures, through other people, where He's guiding me and showing me something. He's helping me to grow. I was stuck in a traffic jam today, late picking up my daughter from school, normal circumstances. I'm frustrated, really irritated, almost chest tightness from my annoyance. Today I was like, learn. God's helping me to grow in this area. So share what God is doing for you now. This is a thing that can be a bit harder, but it's powerful. So what's our most effective evangelism? What should I share with people when I go out, when I bring it up on the bus or at the bus stop, or as they walk along, or in the shop, or someone delivering a package to my house? What should I share if I get the opportunity? Well, share what God has done for you, but then share what God is doing. How you cloak that, what language you cloak that in, may depend on their willingness to hear, but I believe it's the most effective evangelism. Share what God has done, but also then share what He is doing right now.